So we've been getting a lot of questions on what builds I was running during the fastest way to level up video that I put up to you guys for the season pass and also for your shade watch, right? And a lot of you guys were asking what skill build was that, and I don't know if a lot of you guys weren't following me at the time or if we just have more agents in the Division 2 right now that we didn't have back then. But this build right here is probably one of my favorite skill builds to run in the Division 2, and it still works amazing in Title Update 11. Now this is a status effect build with a little bit of skill damage added in there just to give it that little bit of oomph you need to really put out the damage to really complete these heroic bounties, heroic missions. And when you run this build right here in a group, it actually works really good. Now I run this build a lot solo, but you can run this in a group and that's where you're really gonna shine. But you can see how I'm just like melting through these enemies, and this is on heroic difficulty. The world difficulty is on heroic, and once I hit them with the fire starter, right, and then the turret goes in there, and then the vile mask that I am pairing this build up with, it just goes hand in hand. And whether they're gold, purple, or just red enemies, they will die. And the way this build is set up, it just really improves your overall damage in a big area. So even if an enemy gets away, he'll still end up dying. And that's just because of the way the build is set up, the gear set that I'm using, and you guys will see in just a second on how I break this down for you. But I just wanted to show you a little bit of gameplay so you can see the status effects going off, how they die. I didn't even have to shoot one bullet. My turret did all the damage, and of course the status effects. So let's get into the build. So let's break down the build, right? Because this is where all the action is happening. We have a 4-piece gear set on, right? We got the Eclipse. We do have an exotic mask, and then we have a gold holster. We're running around 626,000 armor, and you can actually improve this and run almost 1,000,000 armor and still do the same amount of damage. And I'll explain that in just a second. But we'll break down the skills I use. I do like using the fire starter. Now the fire starter is going to give me 8 shots, right? We have burn damage of 268,000, but the initial explosion damage that it does is 537,000 damage. So a lot of damage right off the bat, and then the burn damage is that continuous damage. And then we run it, I pair it up with the striker drone. The great thing about this is the striker drone will ignite fire. So once I shoot the cloud, if the striker drone is going off, it will ignite it, so I don't have to double tap to ignite it myself. Now, for the weapons, the only thing I would really recommend you putting on this build is the Harmony, and that's because you can perfectly sync. Hitting an enemy grants 20% skill damage for 5 seconds. If your skill gets damaged, that increases your weapon damage by 20% for 5 seconds. But if you have both going active, that's 40% extra damage you get. So that's why you definitely want to be able to try to get that going if you can. For the secondary, you can use whatever you want. The Pestilence is pretty good. Now for the pistol, this new pistol that just came out, that's where all the action is. Now what's great about this is it gives you 1 skill tier. So as long as you have your pistol out, it's going to give you the 6th skill tier. And that's why this is actually really cool. If you can find that and put it on any of your skill builds, you're definitely really going to benefit from it. But for the build itself, so we start off with the Vile Mask. Now this is one of the good pieces, crucial pieces to this build, because it gives us 1 skill tier. We have status effects, hazard protection, and then we put skill haste on here. But toxic delivery is what's really gonna benefit you here, because you have status effects also apply a damage over time debuff for 10 seconds, but the total damage is dealt is equal to 50% of your concussion grenade damage, and it's increased by your status effects. So we're gonna have that throughout this build. And once you see what we pair this up with this green gear set right here called Eclipse Protocol, which the 2-piece is gonna give us 15% status effects, right? That 3-piece is going to give us the skill haste and the hazard protection. But the 4-piece is why it's so good. Indirect transmission. Your status effects now spread on kill to all enemies within 10 meters and refresh 50% of duration. Now, this comes with the skill tier. I have status effects on here, skill haste. But then the chest piece also has that talent, which increases the indirect transmission range from 10 meters to 15 meters, and the refresh percentage from 50% to 75%. So we are going to be using the chest and the backpack, and we'll explain in a second. So the Wyvern, we have skill damage on here, and that's going to help us with that initial damage, and then of course the turret, skill tier, skill damage, status effects. And this is probably like the only piece that's going to give you that 10% skill damage plus give you 3 yellows. So exactly how you want to go with this. Now for the knee pads are going to be the second piece of Eclipse we're running, but we have skill tier and status effects. And then for the gloves, same thing, skill tier, status effects. If you can only choose one or the other, skill tier or skill damage, you want to put the status effects on there. And then for the backpack is the final piece, and this gives us status effects. We put a skill haste mod, and then the backpack, look at the backpack talent, amplifies all damage you deal to status effect targets by 30%. So that's going to work with your drone that's flying around shooting, right? So amplifies all damage. So that means everything you're shooting at it. So that's why the backpack talent and the chest plate talents on the Eclipse actually work really good together. And one thing I did want to say is because we have the pistol, right? We can actually sacrifice one of the skill tiers if we can find probably a holsters with a blue or almost god roll everything. Then I can sacrifice armor roll on one of these to give me a little bit more armor. Or if I want a little bit more damage, I can put weapon damage, right? But that's where you can actually sacrifice by having that one yellow. That's what's really, really cool about this build. Just to show you my watch real quick, I do have an extra 7.4% skill damage on there. We have some skill haste, and then we have skill repair. So the skill repair doesn't really matter, but if you could get the skill duration, skill damage, and skill haste maxed out, it'd improve the build some. So but yeah, this is how I run this build. The mask is where it actually shines the most. This is one of my favorite exotic skill pieces to put on any skill build I run. It just works hand in hand. Now I do want to show you how I have it modded. So we have 1 ammo and then burn strength on the fire starter. So that's really what you want to go with there. So just the 1 extra round, burn strength, and then for the assault drone, right, the striker drone, you want to go with duration, you want to go with health, and then damage on the last one. So those are the 3 mods you want to mod on there, and that should be standard if you're running this type of build. But just so you can see it a little bit more in action if you didn't see it at the very beginning, the initial damage that you see right here, that's why you want the skill damage, because that initial damage, that chunk of damage, and then the status effects, of course, that's going to be the after part. But you can also, if you look at the enemies, you can see when they get the vial mask status effect on them, and then you can see when they get the burn. So when the 2 different ones are affecting them. So that's just something you need to keep in mind. And that's why when you have that indirect transmission from 10 meters to 15 meters, it works. But yeah, this is pretty simple. You really can't complain. I think we got one guy here, and you're gonna see them come out, and you're gonna get a little bit better look at the indirect transmission and then the vial mask, right? So let's take a look at this. So I'm just gonna hit it right here, and then look at all the enemies, right? They're all gonna have the status effects, right? So they have the vial mask one, and then they have the indirect transmission. So pretty easy to make all these statuses spread, and that's why this build is just that fun to use. But that's the build right there. I know a lot of you guys asked about it, and if you guys are trying to do those convoys, this actually works really efficient and really fast. And if you're smart with it, you can actually improve it. So yeah, this build isn't finalized. I still make improvements to all my builds every time I release them. It's just something you do in the division. As you get better pieces, you can plug and play. We'll wrap it up here, guys. I will see you guys in the next Division 2 video. But until then, nothing but skills is out.